You're listening to PetLifeRadio.com.
Is your pet stressed out? Does your pet need annual vaccines? Which pet is best for a child? Would you know if your dog was in pain? Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor, where you'll learn everything about keeping your pet healthy and happy. From pet care, pet meds and grooming, to pet food, pet insurance, and dental care, this is the place to find out everything there is to know about pet wellness. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets, because it's your pet. Health matters. Please welcome your Pet Doctor host, veterinary media consultant and veterinarian, Dr. Bernadine Cruz.
The current buzzword in human and veterinary medicine is wellness. But for my guest, Dr. Jean Dodds, it's been her passion since she graduated from Ontario Veterinary College in Toronto, Canada. For Dr. Dodds, it's been a matter of blood, human and animal, a lot of sweat in the hours spent in research, and groundbreaking work in a common canine condition, underactive thyroid disease. We'll be right back and listen to this fascinating woman tell about all the things she's done in her career, and a lot more to come. So sit, stay, we'll be right back.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
Tired of wasting money on giant boxes of litter that don't work and don't last? Switch to World's Best Cat Litter, the only litter with concentrated power. So even a small bag lasts one cat 30 days. Outstanding odor control, quick lumping, lightweight. It's even flushable. World's Best Cat Litter. Everything else is just litter. Find it near you at www.itsnotjustlitter.com. That's www.itsnotjustlitter.com.
Amazing Pet Expos is coming to a city near you. Admission is always free, and your pet is welcome. Shopping, adoptions, free nail trims, discounted shots and microchipping, agility, a pet costume contest, and much more. Plus, meet the guys from Animal Planet's hit TV series Tank and Pit Boss. Online at AmazingPetExpos.com.
Bring your pets to the Pet Expo.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to The Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio with Dr. Bernadine Cruz. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
Dr. Dodds, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Well, number one, tell us how you got involved in veterinary medicine.
Oh, gosh. You know, I've been a veterinarian for more than 50 years, which, as a woman in our profession, was quite unusual at the time, I guess is the best way to put it.
You were groundbreaking.
Right.
Yeah, no,
not really. I wasn't a feminist. I just assumed that you could do whatever you wanted to do in life if you just worked hard and were determined. And, you know, it didn't really bother me. I had to have farm experience, and being a city girl, that wasn't acceptable without it. So I worked for 2 summers on a farm, hand milking cattle and stooking grain and driving a tractor, which I never killed myself about because I forgot that the chain behind it pulling down the tree had to be longer than the height of the tree. But I jumped out of the way just as the tree came crashing down on where I was sitting. Anyway, make a long story short, at the Ontario Veterinary College, which was a 5-year school, they allowed 20 women in the entire school. So if 2 graduated, 2 got in. If 4 graduated, 4 got in. And that was how it worked.
It's called a quota system at the time, wasn't it?
A quota, yeah, right. So anyway, all I had to do was work very hard and get a perfect grade average, which didn't seem to bother me. I didn't, today I'd be terrified. In those days, I was so brash, I just said, well, whatever you put in front of me, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a vet. And of course, as you might expect, I was not your usual kind of student. I was a little bit irreverent. I was totally for animal welfare. Yes, long before it became de rigueur to care about the animals that we study as much as we do today, And so I was able to graduate. And when I graduated, our valedictorian, a large animal professor, said he didn't believe there was a place for women in veterinary medicine. Even our valedictorian, even though 3 of the top 10 students were women graduates, including myself, tied with the famous Dr. Carlton Giles, who's still at OVC and became an expert in Johne's disease in cattle. So Carlton is the editor of the Canadian Veterinary Journal, and we're still friends. And he said, if it wasn't for Jean pushing me, I never would have done as well as I did. And I always laughed about that. He was really modest.
Well,
so that's what
you
happened.
are amazing because you really have made a difference for women in veterinary medicine and veterinary medicine in general. So you were that one that was pushing the envelope, pushing the borders at all times. So you had no farm experience, tried to kill yourself on a tractor. Then you got into veterinary school, got perfect grades, enjoyed or thought it was so important, and it is, welfare for animals. But then you also got into an area that I'm sure at the time was really steeped in a lot of controversy, research, because they've changed so much on how they're doing research using animals. Talk a little bit about how you got into research and your views there, because that really must have been controversial.
Well, it was, and my late father was a surgeon, graduated from Dartmouth in Canada, from Dalhousie University, went out to the Orient and realized that they needed public health training more than they needed complicated surgery. So he went back to Johns Hopkins and got a degree in public health. In his class there was a famous veterinarian, Dr. Harry Rizal, now passed away, who was doing his Doctor of Veterinary Public Health at the same time. I decided I wasn't going to take any money from my family to go to veterinary school. I was going to work on a bursary and work in noon times, grooming dogs and doing whatever I could to put myself through school, being an independent soul. And I needed a summer job. Well, I used nepotism for the first time in my life. I asked Dr. Rizal for a job. And I got a job at the Ontario
It's called
Veterinary...
networking. It's networking. It's not nepotism.
Well, whatever. I got a job in the summer, that first summer, working at the Ontario Veterinary College research farm. And at that farm, they had the first colony of dogs with inherited bleeding disorders. And they had been donated so that somebody could keep them alive and only study their blood, not do any invasive research, because I was put in charge of them, and I wouldn't allow any studies that were invasive done with these animals. So that's how I got involved in comparative medicine research, where I was studying animal models of human disease in a humane way. And from there, I got directly involved in writing the NIH Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, which is now, of course, still in use worldwide, in our country, but adopted worldwide. And also I was the president of the Scientist Center for Animal Welfare, at a time when we had to say that we needed the 3 R's of Russell and Birch: reduction, replacement, refinement, and how we use living beings. In other words, use tissue cultures and non-living things, mathematical modeling, etc. And then the 3 S's: good science, good stewardship, and good sensibility. And so we practiced that, and I taught all over North America to mainly physicians, researchers in medical school environments about these principles. And it made a huge difference, not just myself, of course, but all the other pioneers at the time standing up at the National Academy of Sciences and saying, you cannot treat animals improperly. And they didn't. And they wouldn't.
And this is fabulous because it has changed so much, and you have really made so much the difference because you laid the groundwork for it. I oftentimes have to somewhat, laugh. People will say, oh, well, this product isn't tested on animals. It may not, and I'd love to have you address that very quickly, because every product, correct me if I'm wrong, that's ever used for people has to have been tested, the components, at some point in its creation. Someone has to do the background work. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the reason why I appeared to have such an influence was I was a veterinarian saying this and trying to teach them that we were scientists too. We were medically trained. We had just as good training as they did, and we had to know all the difference between different species, not just one. My late father used to laugh at me about that, and he said, I can't be, Jean. You couldn't learn the anatomy of all these species. And he would point to a part in his body and say, what's the nerve, what's the whatever. He was so amazed. He said, oh, my God, veterinarians know more than we do.
I think that's one thing that people oftentimes don't realize. And I know when I was at UC Davis my freshman year and was in a situation where I shared transportation with the new medical students, they'd look at us and say, well, why didn't you become a real doctor? And that was really, took us back a bit until we learned the correct answers that, well, you decided you wanted to specialize in one species, and we do them all.
Good point. Yeah, I don't think anybody says that anymore. We're for one health, one medicine, one health, where all individuals are the same and we learn from each other, and what's good for one can be also good for the other.
You were talking about being interested in studying bleeding disorders in this colony of dogs. I think a lot of people will be shocked. I know oftentimes when I have bad news and tell a client, well, your dog has cancer. Dogs get cancer? I think a lot of people are going, dogs get bleeding disorders? They might think of von Willebrand's in dogs. Anyone who has Adobe has probably heard of that. But talk about some of the similarities of bleeding disorders from people and pets.
Well, they're exactly the same, actually. The inheritance is the same. And one of the reasons why we were able to get NIH grant money for the 27 years that I directed that program was because the models were exactly the same, molecularly and genetically identical. And so we could use the animal studies, genetics particularly, because obviously some of them came to us already bred and producing offspring. So we could look at the genetics more easily than one could in a human family. And we learned a lot about that. And then the molecular studies were done, taking blood samples from the animals and studying what was different about their clotting factor proteins. And some of the Genentech, for example, that made the first recombinant factor VIII to treat the common form of human hemophilia, that product was first tested in a boxer named Blue in our colony at Albany, New York. And for 2 days after he was transfused with this product, you can use the human product twice within about 10 days before you get a rejection effect. For 2 days, he got to play with a tennis ball because his clotting factors were completely normal. I've never forgotten that.
That's just amazing. So from all of this research that you did and your interest in bleeding disorders, is that what brought you to start Hemopet?
Yes, interestingly enough, because at the time in the state of New York, at the late 70s and early 80s, that's when AIDS and transfusion issues and blood safety became critical throughout the world. And of course, in California and in New York at the same time, we knew about this disease. What happened was there were no physician hematologists in New York State Department of Health at that time. So as a hematologist, studying comparative medicine, knowing as much about human hematology as I did animal hematology, I was made the director of the Human Blood and Transfusion Services program. And because of that, we were able to start, all of the regulations for the state of New York to protect the blood supply. And I therefore had to attend all the regional Red Cross meetings as an advisor. I was driving home one night from a Red Cross meeting, and I thought, holy cow, I said, wow. Why don't we have a blood bank for animals just like we do for people? This is ridiculous. We do it already. Our hemophilic dogs and von Willebrand's disease affected dogs had to have transfusions to keep them alive. And we did all the same things you do with humans, at our colony level. I said, why do we do that as a product for veterinary medicine? We need to do that. So I devised the logo, a heart-shaped life preserver called Pet Lifeline. I drew it that night when I got home. I had it professionally drawn. And then I thought we need a name for the company. Pet Lifeline sounds nice. It's for the adoption part of blood donors, et cetera, et cetera. What about the company Hemopet, blood for pets, Hemapet? No, Hemopet. It sounds better than Hemapet. And that's how it developed.
And Hemopet is the first nonprofit national blood bank, and it's still in operation, correct?
Correct. Since 1990, when we started, we did service North America, but Canada now has their own smaller blood banks, which we're happy about. We service 40% of the blood supply in the United States, and we also supply Hong Kong in the Orient. We also teach blood banking technology for veterinarians all over the world who come to develop their own blood bank for their country. Our purpose is not to serve everybody, but to be the gold standard for how to teach others to do that. So we had a Mexican veterinarian doing her graduate studies who came to learn how to develop a blood bank in Mexico, for example, in Ecuador, in other South American countries, Brazil, Portugal, the UK. Pet Blood Bank UK has just the end of last year, had 1,000 blood donors. They use volunteer donors. We're not allowed to do that in California, but they do, and we taught them how to do that. The girl came over, young lady, boarded internist, came over to start a for-profit blood bank. I said, no way. These are non-profit programs. That's how everybody knows them. So they set up a non-profit blood bank, Pet Blood Bank UK, and it's very successful and supplies all of that part of the world. It's incredible.
So I can imagine people think of, dogs standing in line, kind of like at a Red Cross, and laying down, putting their little paws out and getting their blood drawn and getting their milk bone biscuit when they're done. But you're saying, and this is something I'm aware of, you don't, as I should say, you mentioned there aren't ways of just having dogs off the street come and do it. They need to be very well regulated and screened. And you have your own greyhounds. Why did you decide on using greyhounds?
Well, there's a couple of issues. First of all, volunteer blood bank donors are available in other parts of the country and the world. They have to be screened for infectious disease and blood type, just like human blood donors would be. They don't get milk bones, by the way. Those are grains. But anyway, sorry, had to put that little later. Dig in there. Anyway, all right. We use greyhounds because the state of California requires closed colony donors. They're not allowed to be interactive with the public because they could be carrying infectious diseases. It's the only state that has blood bank regulations for animals. I was actually part of developing the regulations for that, as you might expect. We decided to make a statement about large animals that are not adoptable from pounds and shelters. And also, we realized greyhounds from the racing industry in other states were being destroyed, thousands of them. I said, what about making a statement about them? They're short-haired, they're lovable, they're easy to adopt. Why don't we set up a program to rescue and adopt greyhounds, which is why we chose the breed.
And it's wonderful. There's not a heavy coat, so you can see those veins a little bit more easily when you need access. So you're talking about these greyhounds not being adopted, but now they're in your colony. How long do they stay in the colony, and what happens to them after that?
Every single animal that comes to HemoPet is adopted out. The only ones that wouldn't be are ones that suddenly had things like refractory epilepsy that we didn't know about, that it's just not safe to put them in a home. So we keep them for the rest of their natural lives as long as they're not suffering. The greyhounds stay with us for about 12 months total. Remember, some of them they're coming from Arizona, Texas, and Oklahoma. Some of them are not neutered or spayed. Some of them have to be acclimated because they don't have any idea. They have to learn how to be a house pet. So it takes 2 to 3 months to get them ready. Then they get into the blood donor program, and they give a pediatric unit, which is half the amount that a normal adult human would give, every 2 weeks for not more than 12 months, not more than, and usually 10 months. And meanwhile, we've got them adopted. We've interviewed the home. They have to have a fenced-in yard. We've picked the home that the animal's going to go to. The people learn to bond with that animal by coming and working with the dog, weekends, nights, whenever. Not late nights, but, late afternoon, early evening. And then when the animal goes home, it knows the family. It's their forever home. If anything ever happens, they're to bring the animal back to us. And we got a 12-and-a-half-year-old returned to us 3 weeks ago because 2 little dogs in the family beat the dog up and chewed up its right hind leg very badly. Right.
That's amazing.
The emergency veterinarian said, get rid of the 2 little dogs. The caregiver said, no, they brought the big dog back. We've nursed him to health. He had a huge problem. He was very, very sick. He's back to health again, and now we're looking for the appropriate home for him now that his leg is healed.
Amazing story. My guest right now is Dr. Jean Dodds. She's an animal advocate, researcher, and pioneer in veterinary welfare and wellness. We'll be right back after this short break.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
Hi, Jill. I see you and Bella are enjoying this lovely day as well.
It's a perfect day for a walk. Isn't that right, Bella?
And what a colorful ID tag you have, Bella. It certainly puts my Rusty's boring engraved tag to shame.
Isn't it great? It's a dog tag art tag.
Dog tag art?
Yeah, dog tag art makes the world's coolest pet ID tags. Pick from hundreds of cute designs or upload your photos or artwork to create a unique tag of your own. They even give you 4 lines of text on the back of the tag for important contact information.
I love it! But do they hold up? We have to replace Rusty's metal tags so often because the information wears away.
Dog tag art tags are some of the highest quality pet tags out there. They're made with super durable stainless steel. Your information is always legible and the tags are guaranteed for life.
Well, I'm sold. Where can I get my dog tag art tag for Rusty?
DogTagArt.com. Shopping there is so easy and fun. You're sure to find one that matches Rusty's personality perfectly.
Sounds great! We can't wait to get online and get a tag of our own.
DogTagArt.com. We keep best friends together. Use the coupon code RADIO for a 25% discount off any tag.
There's nothing more delicious and healthy than an old family recipe. And for over 50 years, our family's been creating them especially for your pets. Nutrisource Super Premium Pet Foods. Dog and cat food that's all natural, holistic, and organic. Nutrisource Pet Foods contain our patented Good for Life system for your pet's optimum health and well-being. So order now. Safe quality food made by our family for your furry family members. Go to NutrisourcePetFoods.com.
From our family to yours, KLM Family Brands.
Let's talk pets
Let's talk pets
on Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to the Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio with Dr. Bernadine Cruz. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
Dr. Dodds, you have been doing some amazing things in veterinary medicine, and I know that you're still going strong after, you're saying 50 years. That's nothing. You just have so much energy. I know one of your new endeavors has been Hemo Life. So you did Hemo Pet, which is the first nonprofit national blood bank. What's Hemo Life?
Hemo Life is our veterinary diagnostic program, and it's international. We get samples every day, except Sundays, from all over the world. And we do specialty diagnostics. In other words, testing that is not normally available through veterinary diagnostic laboratories or in-office machines. So we developed our own patented thyroid diagnostic testing, which does not use radioisotopes at all. All of the other veterinary diagnostic programs testing for thyroid use radioisotopes in one or more of the tests. We decided we didn't want to contaminate the environment, and we didn't want our staff to be involved with radioisotopes. So we developed our technology, not from America, it's from Europe, and many places would like to know how we do it, but it's a trade secret. We did that. We patented it. We then developed a unique salivary diagnostic test for food intolerance. And it's the only one in the world. Works in dogs, cats, and horses. And we're looking for intolerance to foods rather than allergies. True food allergies are immediate reactions and are very rare. Food intolerances, however, with chronic itching or stomach problems or abdominal discomfort or diarrhea or whatever, are very common in a subset of animals. And so we test for those with 24 foods. And the test is called Nutriscan. We're just starting the program for Nutriscan in horses, and we're waiting for our first clinical trial samples. So this test has been the Nutriscan test has been available since 2012. We've done about 8,000 tests in the dog, about 400 so far in the cat. And it's an extremely fascinating test that tells people what their animals should not eat. It doesn't tell them what they should eat. It tells them of the 24 foods we test what they should not eat. We pioneered vaccine titer testing. We've been doing that for many, many years. I helped develop the IFA testing for titers in the year 2000. Since then, we have our own in-house veterinary vaccine titer testing, and again, it's done all over the world. We do other specialty testing as part of a send-out protocol with our own testing and also a send-out laboratory, say at a university, for example, for specialty testing. And then we report all of this electronically on a laboratory information system. We had one specifically designed for us in 2009, and we have had 81,000 samples in that system. And all of the reports go out electronically over the Internet.
It is amazing. You're talking about having patents, and if anyone has ever tried to get a patent, they know how extremely difficult it is. Dr. Dodds, you're just saying this rather humbly that you have, this is patented. How many patents do you own?
About 30, but I have to confess that my husband's a patent attorney.
Is that nepotism?
Yes, of course. And, I don't have to pay for the patents, but I guess I pay by doing the laundry and all those other things. Although I've taught him how to cook, and he's a good cook now. Anyway, the first patent we had was for von Willebrand factor measurements, actually. So the von Willebrand factor test for animals that is done at Cornell University. My program moved to the veterinary school at Cornell when I left Albany in 1988. actually part-time since 1986. And then 1988, I moved permanently to California. And so that was the first patent, and it's still the one used worldwide. It works in all species. All mammalian species can be assayed by this particular factor because we found the conserved mammalian epitope center of that protein. And so the antibodies are against that conserved protein. It even works in humans.
Well, I'm really glad that the year that you applied to Ontario Veterinary College in Toronto, that one of the senior women left, because with you not getting into veterinary medicine, I'm not sure where we would be right now. Thank you very much for all your efforts.
You're welcome.
I'd kind of like to go through some different factors or different components of your hemo life. So talked a little bit about thyroid. So thyroid, what is a thyroid condition? Because oftentimes people come in with a fat dog going, oh yes, it has an underactive thyroid. And I think oftentimes they don't understand what the thyroid is and what it does in their own bodies or their pets.
Right. Well, we actually wrote a book in 2011, my co-author Diana Laverdura and I, called The Canine Thyroid Epidemic. And it was awarded the best dog healthcare book for that year, which we're very proud of. And that describes...
Dog Writers of America, correct?
Yes, Dog Writers Association of America, right. It's published by Dogwise in 2011. Basically, the thyroid is the endocrine gland that gets the messages from the pituitary gland in our head, and it's the master gland that controls really all the functions in the body, enzyme levels, interactions between organs, and of course it's an endocrine organ, so it controls hormone function.
And explain what endocrine is.
Endocrine is a hormone. Like endocrine function would be from the pancreas. You get diabetes when insulin's not working properly. You have adrenal hormones that produce diseases like Cushing's disease, which is an overactive adrenal gland, or Addison's disease, which is a heritable immune-mediated destruction of the adrenal gland. So what happens in thyroid dysfunction, in the dog it's hypo or underactive. In the cat, older cat, it's usually hyper, overactive. But it's basically a similar disease process where there's an immune reaction that either stimulates the thyroid gland to produce more than it should or suppresses it. What people don't know is that until 70% of the canine thyroid gland is damaged or inactivated, you don't get classical signs of fat, lazy, hate the cold, bad skin, and hair coat. The animal doesn't wake up tomorrow with an underactive thyroid. It's a progressive process that can take a year to 15 months or so. And I have to tell you, one of the most frustrating things for me as a veterinarian after all these years is how little our profession is taught about this in veterinary school or even in continuing education. They don't know that you don't put thyroid medication with food, even if the label tells you to, because the drug binds to calcium or soy. They don't know that you really have to give it twice a day, even if they tell you give it once. They don't know that a T4 alone is an inaccurate way to assess thyroid function. It's just amazing how little the average veterinarian, well-intentioned and well-meaning, understands about this problem.
Myself included, because I'm learning new things, and that's what I love about this show, is that I have guests such as yourself on. It's like, I think I have to look into that a little bit more. Thank you very much. Is medication always the answer?
Medication's not always the answer for thyroid dysfunction. Sometimes we have a temporary issue, like a stress event or some other disease. But if you don't assay the thyroid function normally, if you just do a total T4, it's going to look low from a variety of other situations, including the use of certain drugs. If you do a complete thyroid antibody profile and assess everything, and it's abnormal, it's probably a thyroid medication requirement. However, if the thyroid gland is temporarily suppressed from some stress event or whatever, you can try thyroid support products instead that will make the thyroid gland work more efficiently. So you can try that initially. However, if an animal suddenly becomes aggressive and attacks an owner or bites a stranger or tries to attack a child or another dog very viciously, you can't fool around with those cases. If that's a thyroid problem, they need thyroid medication. Support products and natural products won't work adequately, and God forbid you've got a liability there with an animal that's totally off the wall because it doesn't understand what's happening to its body.
Dr. Dodds, you're mentioning that you could have a pet that was cold intolerant, had a greasy coat, was overweight, but now this behavioral aspect. So if you have a wonderful dog who all of a sudden just seems to become unglued, and that can be a sign of an underactive thyroid?
Absolutely. And often in those cases, about 90% of these cases are due to an autoimmune destruction of the thyroid gland. And that's inherited, by the way. So if that happens, then obviously if it's a breeding dog, the family needs to be checked to make sure that they don't breed those animals anymore that carry the marker autoantibody for this process. Yes, behaviorally it can be anything. This is puberty or slightly older. We used to see thyroid disease in dogs that were 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. We still do that, but it can occur any time now from puberty onward. So the average dog is going to be 1.5 to 2. So it would be a sudden change in behavior. It could be phobias suddenly. It could be submissiveness and passivity, like, roll over and pee when someone comes to the door to say hello. Totally different. Or you could just be sitting with an animal that you're normally very happy with. You're watching TV in the evening. The animal's asleep beside you. You put your hand down to pet the animal, and it attacks you and bites you on the wrist. Now, many of these animals have swollen thyroid glands because of the inflammatory process that's destroying them. And if they have a collar and it's tight across the front of their neck, especially if they're out running around and you're pulling on the collar, that can injure and further inflame the thyroid gland. So we tell people they really should be wearing harnesses for animals like that. If you use a prong collar, it's going to be even more injurious to the thyroid gland, which sits like a butterfly-shaped organ right in front of the windpipe. So it's right exposed in the neck.
Fascinating. So things that I'm learning that I need to be more aware of. And when people say, hey, doc, the dog was fabulous before and is now turned into this alligator, it's not just a dog who may have mental issues. It's definitely physiological.
Absolutely. And please remember, people, not a total T4 alone. You have to do a complete thyroid profile. And yes, it's more expensive, but you've got to rule it in or out up front, or this animal is going to be put to sleep. And God forbid that it's really a thyroid problem that can be readily corrected.
Speaking of things that can be corrected, you corrected me when I said, all right, you have this dog who's donating blood and you get a milk bone afterwards. It's like, oh, no. So Nutrigenomics, I know, is your new book, Foods That Heal Your Dog. It was just published. Tell us a little bit about that and this salivary test.
Right. Well, nutrigenomics is the combination word. It was coined like pharmacogenomics. All of these words were coined in the early 2000s in human and animal medicine. And it's a combination of nutrition and our genes. In fact, nutrition controls the expression of our genes. How about that? People, wow. Cats, and dogs have about 21,000 genes. That's all. We all have about the same number. That's not a lot. But the genome is the process or the product of our body where the genes work. And genes make up 2% of the genome. 98% of the genome is what tells the genes what to do. Nutrition controls the expression of our genes.
So we are what we eat.
We are what we eat. And every individual, except for their identical twin, has a unique genetic requirement for food to promote health and longevity. And that's what this book is about. It's for the dog, but it also applies to cats and people. It's not a recipe book. It's been out since mid-January. It's a bestseller. We've got 5 stars all over the place again. And I can't believe it took Diana and I so long to write this book. And yet I read it and I think, did we really write this? This is amazing. Because, after the fact, you think back, oh my God.
Wow, you're pretty good.
It's sophisticated, but it's also written in an understandable way. And that's the gift that Diana has to bring to my science writing. The two of us together make the book public friendly in terms of understanding it. And each chapter has takeaway points that are summarizing the points. And the book is full of these full scientific references for everything that we state in it. We're so excited about it. So nutrigenomics is finding out what foods promote health and finding out what foods are not good for you that promote chronic inflammation. Obesity is chronic inflammation. Diabetes is prone, because when you're obese, you're more prone to diabetes. Chronic tissue inflammation and even cancers are related to what we eat. The things that are not good for us cause chronic inflammation and promote things like, God forbid, cancer. Things we should eat, the healthy things, promote gene expression to give us long life and good health and happiness. It's so important. So, NutriScan is salivary testing for food intolerance. So we test 24 foods to tell the pet caregiver for the dog or the cat, and hopefully the horse when we have those data done, which foods that animal should eat specifically. to maintain good health. In other words, what foods on the list they should have and what foods on the list they shouldn't have. Then we add to things like that fresh veggies and fruits and berries.
Is there a common list of what most animals should not eat?
Yes, there is, and the book actually lists those. The things that should be avoided, not just foods, I mean additives, supplements, right? Of course, then all our pesticides and chemicals, et cetera, et cetera. We also talk about the foods that are anti-angiogenic. That means foods that stop blood vessels from growing in cancers. So there's certain foods that prevent the growth of cancer cells. Apples would be number one. Artichokes would be number two. Things like kale, things like bok choy, things like berries. I mean, my colleague says, artichokes? Animals don't eat artichokes, Jean. I said, forget it. You cut them up and you disguise them. Of course they will if you need it. There's lots of foods that have incredible health-promoting effects.
I think when we finish this conversation, I'm going to have some berries and apples. So, yes. You had mentioned grains. That seems to be a real buzzword right now where all these foods are grain-free. Your views on grains?
I agree that wheat, corn, and soy to a lesser extent, but definitely wheat and corn should not be fed routinely to our companion animals or even ourselves, actually. Most corn is GMO. There's an incredible website, Just Say No to GMO, that will tell you about all the things that are in these foods. Glyphosate, 1,000 times the glyphosate level in beverages that we drink because they're from fructose corn syrup. 1,000 times the EPA level for glyphosate. Mycotoxins, mold toxins, are in foods, both for animals and humans. They're regulated in the human food industry to some extent, or should be more, but whatever, but not in the pet food industry specifically. So no wheat or corn. And then soy is a phytoestrogen, a plant estrogen. So you want to be careful about that. So are peas, by the way, and more premium pet foods have peas and pea fiber in them today. So we need to watch that for fertility issues in animals for breeding. So yes, no grains. Now, the bottom line, don't feed glutens. So gluten-free. Gluten-free. I'm gluten-free now. I have been, and we're vegetarians for many, many years. But I've been gluten-free for the last 2 or 3 years religiously because I can't handle glutens anymore at my age for some reason. So we don't want, so if you buy oatmeal, it should be listed as gluten-free. Rye is a gluten. Barley is a gluten. Wheat and corn, all those things that are glutens we don't want.
Jean, this is just amazing, and I have a feeling I will definitely need to have you back as a guest because I know people right now are going, oh, but I want to know more. So if they want to know more, they should buy the book, Nutrigenomics. If they want to know more about blood banking and how maybe in their area they can set up a blood bank, Hemopet, right. What else should they know? Last thing, party
by the
words.
way, the book is Canine Nutrigenomics.
Okay.
The New Science of Feeding Your Dog for Optimum Health. We need to talk about vaccines. We didn't have time to do that, but that's another huge bugaboo area of mine. Animals are over-vaccinated all the time, even with 3-year vaccines. We don't need them. You can do a blood test instead.
Well, you have just now teased everyone. I will have you back as a guest, and we will definitely talk about vaccines because that is an area that is constantly going through change, and I know you're one of the pioneers in this. My guest today has been Dr. Jean Dodds. She is an amazing veterinarian who has really helped human medicine as well as veterinary medicine. Thank you very much, Jean, for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Please listen again next week. We'll have more information on how to make you the best possible pet owner. This is Dr. Bernadine Cruz. If you have any suggestions of topics that you would like to have covered, please drop us a line. Thank you so much for listening.
Pets can be a wonderful addition to your life because they're a member of the family. Keeping them healthy and happy is important. Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor with veterinary media consultant and veterinarian Dr. Bernadine Cruz. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets. The Pet Doctor, on demand every week, only on PetLifeRadio.com.